In the early hours of March 14th, 1989, four college friends were walking through Matamoros, Mexico. I don't speak Spanish, I'm sorry. Toward the bridge leading back to the United States. The crowds were thinning out and their night was pretty much over. Three of the friends reached the bridge, but Mark Kilroy did not. His friends had only been separated him for a few minutes. They turned around, retraced their steps, checked nearby streets, and waited for their friend to show back up, but he never did. For the next 4 weeks, Mark's parents searched on both sides of the border. They handed out photographs, spoke to reporters, contacted government officials, and refused to accept the idea that their son just simply wandered off without telling them. Then, on April 11th, police began digging at a remote ranch approximately 20 miles outside of Matamoros where they were. They found Mark, but he was not alone. Investigators initially recovered 12 bodies, and a 13th was found shortly afterward, and authorities would eventually connect at least 15 killings in the Matamoros area to the same organization. Beside the graves stood a ritualistic shed filled with weapons, blood, animal remains, candles, and a large iron cauldron containing human tissue. The man behind it called himself El Padrino, the Godfather. His name was Adolfo de Jesus Constanzo. He had convinced drug traffickers that his rituals could protect their shipments, stop bullets, confuse the police, and make them invisible to law enforcement. And for months, they all believed him, right up until the police found their ranch. Mark James Kilroy was born on March 5th, 1968. Mark grew up in Santa Fe, Texas, a small community outside of Houston, along with his brother Keith. He was raised Catholic.
Hey, me too.
And his family regularly attended the Our Lady of Lourdes Catholic Church. Mark was the kind of person who seemed to be involved in everything. He was an honor student, served on student council, and graduated 14th out of a class of 210 students. He played baseball, basketball, and golf, and was also involved in the Boy Scouts. After graduating from Santa Fe High School in 1986, he attended Southwest Texas State University before transferring to Tarleton State University on a basketball scholarship. At Tarleton, he joined the Lambda Chi Alpha fraternity. Eventually, Mark decided competitive athletics was not the future he wanted. He transferred again, this time to the University of Texas at Austin, where he became a pre-med student and began preparing for the MCAT. His parents, Jim and Helen Kilroy, described him as deeply grounded in his Catholic faith and close to his family. His friends remembered someone responsible and dependable, the kind of person who would not just suddenly disappear without telling anyone. Later accounts would claim that his abductors saw his height, health, and education as qualities that made him valuable. But investigators also described what happened to him as horribly random. And before Mark became known around the world as the victim in this case, he was just a 21-year-old college student going out on spring break with his friends. South Padre Island was already one of the biggest spring break destinations in the country. Students came for the beaches, clubs, huge crowds, and apparently a daily Miss Tan Line contest that even Mark and his friends would occasionally stop to watch. Part of the experience for many students was also crossing the Gateway International Bridge from Brownsville into Matamoros. Mark traveled south along with 3 lifetime friends, Bradley Moore, Bill Huddleston, and Brent Martin. Another friend, Ryan Fenley, had planned to go, but he changed his mind shortly before the trip. He would later keep newspaper clippings and missing posters of Mark and continue to speak publicly about what happened to his friend. On the night of March 13th, Mark and the other 3 crossed into Matamoros and spent the evening visiting bars and clubs packed with other American students. Nothing about the night really seemed unusual, but that's what makes what happened next so unsettling. In the early hours of March 14th, the group decided to head back to Brownsville. As they walked towards the bridge, Mark became separated from the others. Accounts differ slightly on the final moments his friends saw him. Some say he stopped or slowed down, Others say he may have briefly spoken with someone. But everyone agrees on one important detail: they were only separated for a few minutes. His friends assumed Mark would catch up, but when he didn't, they turned around. They retraced their route, searched nearby streets, and checked around the bridge, but Mark was nowhere to be found. His friends reported him missing and contacted his family. Jim and Helen immediately traveled to the border, handed out photographs, talked to reporters, contacted officials, and pushed authorities to take the disappearance seriously. Now, Matamoros was packed with college students drinking during spring break, and students being reported missing only to turn up later after blacking out, getting lost, or sleeping somewhere unexpected was not unheard of. Some accounts even reported that Mark was one of dozens of people reported missing in Matamoros during the first few months of 1989. So initially, there were some suggestions that maybe he wandered off or he would just eventually show up. But his parents did not believe that. They knew their son, they knew he would have called, and days eventually became weeks. The Kilroys kept his photograph in the news, worked with both American and Mexican authorities, appealed to the public, and eventually they offered a reward. Mark's disappearance became a major story on both sides of the border, but for nearly a month, the only people who knew what happened to him were the people that were responsible for his disappearance. Adolfo de Jesus Constanzo was born in Miami, Florida, on November 1st, 1962. After his mother's first husband died, she remarried and moved the family to Puerto Rico. Constanzo was baptized Catholic and reportedly served as an altar boy, but later accounts described another side of his religious upbringing. He allegedly traveled with his mother to Haiti, where he was exposed to voodoo. Some biographies also claim that his stepfather was involved in both Palo and drug trafficking. Those same sources allege that Constanzo and his mother were arrested several times for things like theft, vandalism, and shoplifting. He reportedly graduated from high school, but was later expelled from a preparatory school. A lot of Constanzo's early life gets murky depending on which source you read, so I would take some of those details as allegations rather than perfectly documented biography. Constanzo moved to Mexico City. There he met Martin Quintana, George or Jorge Montes, and Omar Oria, who became some of his earliest and closest followers. Together, they ran a profitable spiritual business offering spells, cleansings, divination, and rituals for luck, money, protection, and revenge. Animal sacrifices was reportedly part of some ceremonies, including chickens, goats, and snakes. There are also claims involving much more exotic animals like zebras and even lion cubs, which honestly I wouldn't be too surprised out knowing this guy. Constanzo attracted wealthy clients willing to pay large amounts for elaborate ceremonies. His clientele was said to include businessmen, entertainers, drug traffickers, hired killers, and corrupt police officers. Some of those officers allegedly introduced him to more powerful figures in Mexico's criminal world. There are also claims that his circle had some connection to the Gulf Cartel, although the extent of that relationship is kind of unclear. But what is clear is that he became deeply involved with drug traffickers, and he offered them exactly what people in that world wanted, and it was protection. He claimed that his rituals could protect shipments, identify traitors, harm enemies, confuse police, stop bullets, and even make people effectively invisible to law enforcement. If a drug shipment made it through safely, Constanzo took the credit. If it didn't, then apparently the ritual had been performed incorrectly or they needed a stronger sacrifice, which is pretty convenient. Either way, the answer was always to rely on Constanzo for more. His followers called him El Padrino, the Godfather. He was no longer just somebody they paid for spiritual service, he became their leader. Constanzo reportedly shifted between charm and brutality. Followers who pleased him could receive money, status, attention, or praise. But those who challenged him could be humiliated, threatened, punished, or worse. Many of these men were already comfortable with violence. because of the drug trade. Constanzo simply gave that violence a supernatural purpose. Now, were they really a satanic group? The short answer, not really. Once the bodies were discovered, newspapers began describing Constanzo and his followers as Satanists, witches, voodoo cultists, and especially narco-Satanists. That last one really stuck. You can even see that title all around today, and I'm probably going to be using it as well. But it does not accurately describe what they practiced. Constanzo drew heavily from Palo, an Afro-Cuban religious tradition with roots in Central African spiritual cultures, particularly those within the Congo region. Palo itself is not devil worship, and Satanism is actually more complicated than people sometimes assume. Many modern Satanists are aesthetic and use Satan symbolically rather than believing or worshipping the literal devil. There's also theistic Satanists, who believe in Satan as a supernatural being. But there's no clear evidence that Constanzo and his followers were worshipping the devil in that sense either. Honestly, Satanism probably deserves its own video because there are several different traditions, beliefs, and philosophies under that label. What Constanzo practiced was more like a violent mixture of Palo, folk Catholic imagery, Spiritism, Mexican folk beliefs, occult practices, and ideas that he either altered heavily or created himself. Calling them Satanists was much easier and scarier, especially during the satanic panic of the 1980s, but it wasn't really that accurate. One sacred object used in some Palo traditions is called an nganga, prenda, or ritual vessel. Depending on the tradition, it can contain things like oil, sticks, minerals, metals, animal material, and other spiritually meaningful objects. Some Palo lineages may also use human remains obtained from graves as a part of a spiritual relationship with the dead. His own vessel reportedly contained items including animal blood, a goat's head, chicken remains, a turtle, herbs, wax, chains, horseshoes, coins, bones, and human brain tissue. His followers believed it held supernatural power, but police saw a pot filled with evidence. Investigators commonly described it as an iron pot or cauldron, so from here on out, I'm calling it a cauldron as well. Mostly because nganga is not exactly the easiest word to say 25 million times in one video, and I'm lazy. Constanzo eventually became involved with members of the Hernandez family who were smuggling marijuana across the border. Their operation used Rancho Santa Elena, a remote property about 20 miles west of Matamoros. The ranch gave them the privacy, storage, and enough distance from the city to operate without attracting much attention. It was also where Constanzo performed rituals he claimed would protect the family, their associates, and their drug shipments. Members carried objects he prepared and genuinely began believing that his ceremonies were helping them pass checkpoints, avoid police, and survive conflicts with rivals. Every time something went right, it became more proof that Constanzo's power supposedly worked. Later accounts link Constanzo to other killings in and around Mexico City. Some of the victims associated with his organization appear to have been rival traffickers or people killed during criminal disputes. Others appeared to have been selected specifically for ritual purposes. Several bodies recovered at the ranch showed mutilation or removal of body parts. Constanzo taught his followers that human remains could strengthen the cauldron and transfer qualities from the victim into protection it supposedly provided. By March 1989, Rancho Santa Elena was already a killing ground. Mark Kilroy was not their first victim, but his disappearance was the one that would eventually expose all of them. According to confessions and investigative accounts, members of Constanzo's organization were in Matamoros searching for a victim when they noticed Mark near the bridge. Some sources say Constanzo wanted a young Anglo man or someone educated. Others claim he wanted a physically strong victim whose intelligence, courage, or strength could supposedly be transferred to the cauldron. There is even a later story that Constanzo was unhappy with a previous victim because that man had not shown enough fear before dying. Mark was young, healthy, athletic, educated, and American. Some accounts say that made him especially desirable. Others suggest that the choice was completely random. One arrested participant reportedly said that Mark was chosen for no reason other than the fact that he happened to be there. So, was he specifically selected? Or was he simply the first person that they could get isolated? Even the people involved gave different answers. Members of the group grabbed Mark and forced him into a vehicle. Serafin Hernandez Garcia and Mario Fabio Ponce Torres are identified in some accounts as directly involved. One reconstruction says that Mark actually managed to break away and run before another vehicle intercepted him. He was reportedly subdued at gunpoint, restrained, and placed back inside the vehicle. From there, they drove him out of Matamoros toward Rancho Santa Elena. Later accounts say Mark was held overnight and that someone brought him food and water before Constanzo arrived. Before getting into this part, just a heads up that it is kind of graphic, but Mark's final hours have been reconstructed from confessions and statements made by members of the group, Mexican investigators, contemporary news reports, physical evidence recovered from the ranch, and later narrative accounts. One of the most detailed retellings come from Edward Hume's book, Buried Secrets. There is also a book called Sacrifice that was written by Mark's father, Jim Kilroy, and Bob Stewart, which focuses on the investigation and the Kilroy family's response afterward. So some details are a little bit more documented than others. Mark was restrained inside or near the ritual shed. Investigators in later accounts describe severe physical abuse before his death, with injuries reported to his back, shoulders, chest, legs, head, and neck. He was reportedly beaten and struck or cut with a machete or another heavy-edged weapon. Some accounts describe the attack continuing for an extended period and involving ritualistic cutting. His fatal injury is generally described as a powerful machete blow to the back of his head, skull, or upper neck. Some reports say the blow severed or nearly severed his spinal cord. After Mark died, portions of his brain and spinal tissue were reportedly removed. Investigators said human brain matter was found inside of Constanzo's cauldron. Several vertebrae or parts of Mark's spinal column were also reportedly removed. Constanzo taught his followers that certain body parts could carry qualities that strengthened the cauldron. So if Mark was seen as intelligent, athletic, and strong, his killers may have believed that those qualities could somehow be transferred through the ritual. Mark's legs were severed above the knees, and the most common explanation that I found was disturbingly practical. Mark was over 6 feet tall. His body did not fit in the grave that they had already prepared for him, so instead of digging it a little bit bigger, they just shortened his body. He was buried wearing much of his clothing. Later accounts also describe a length of a wire attached to or positioned along his spinal area, with part of it left extending upward through the grave. According to statements attributed to members of the group, the wire was supposed to help them locate Mark's body again after decomposition. They apparently planned to return and remove additional bones that could then be used as ritual objects or protective charms. So in their mind, burying him wasn't even the end because they expected to come back and take even more of him. Rancho Santa Elena was not uncovered until April 11th. For nearly 4 weeks, the people responsible continued trafficking drugs and going about their lives, while Mark's parents searched desperately for him. The break in the case came through a drug investigation, actually. Mexican federal police were investigating people connected to the Hernandez organization, and this is where one of the strangest stories came into the entire case. According to the most famous version, Serafin Hernandez drove through a police checkpoint because he believed Constanzo's rituals had made him invisible. Police followed him because, spoiler alert, they could see him just fine. That supposedly led officers back towards Rancho Santa Elena. At the ranch, authorities discovered roughly 243 pounds of marijuana, cocaine, weapons, vehicles, and evidence of drug smuggling. They also found ritual objects and the shed where Constanzo's ceremonies had taken place. During questioning, someone connected to the ranch reportedly recognized Mark from one of those missing person posters. Members of the organization then began talking about murders and burial sites. Authorities returned with suspects who showed them where to dig. On April 11th, investigators began uncovering bodies. Mark was one of the first victims identified. His clothing, physical characteristics, and dental records helped confirm who he was. For Jim and Helen Kilroy, nearly a month of searching had ended, but the excavation was only beginning. Police initially announced that 12 bodies had been recovered. A 13th was found shortly afterward. Authorities eventually attributed at least 15 killings in the Matamoros area to Constanzo's organization, and investigators suspected that the actual number could have been even higher. Near the graves, investigators examined the shed used for Constanzo ceremonies. Inside around it were blood, candles, ritual objects, animal remains, knives, machetes, and an iron cauldron containing human tissue. The discovery immediately exploded across the media. The headlines used words like satanic, voodoo, occult, black magic, cannibalism, human sacrifice. Some descriptions were based on actual evidence, but others were just kind of made up. Investigators reportedly found no reliable evidence that the group practiced cannibalism. By the time Rancho Santa Elena was fully exposed, Constanzo had fled Matamoros. He went to Mexico City with several close followers and moved between apartments as the manhunt closed in. Understandably, he reportedly became increasingly paranoid. On March 6, 1989, police arrived near the apartment where Constanzo and several followers were hiding. Some reports say officers were actually responding to an unrelated disturbance rather than specifically looking for him. Constanzo apparently thought that they had found him anyway. Gunfire erupted from the apartment. Police surrounded the building and returned fire. Inside, according to the surviving followers, Constanzo eventually ordered Alvaro de Leon Valdez, sorry, I don't speak Spanish again, to kill him and Martin Quintana. De Leon later claimed Constanzo threatened him with supernatural punishment if he refused, so obviously he obeyed. When police entered the apartment, Constanzo and Quintana were dead. Constanzo was only 26 years old. Sara, Aldrete, de Leon, and other surviving followers were arrested. Several surviving members of the organization were prosecuted in Mexico for crimes including murder, criminal association, drug trafficking, and other related offenses. The legal proceedings continued for years, and several defendants received lengthy prison sentences. Sara Aldrete was convicted and remained imprisoned in Mexico. She later accused authorities of abuse and torture, and other defendants also claimed that some confessions had been coerced. But it's not like that mattered anyway, because the case didn't just have confessions, they had bodies, graves, drugs, weapons, vehicles that they used, and ritual objects. Human tissue was also inside the cauldron, and physical evidence connecting the organization to Rancho Santa Elena. People can debate exactly who performed each individual act or how much every person knew, but everything that happened at that ranch, you can't really dispute. For nearly a month, Mark Kilroy's name appeared beneath the word missing. After April 11th, 1989, his name became attached to words like cult, sacrifice, murder, and Satanism. But those words never defined him. He was a son, a brother, a friend, a student, and an amazing athlete. And a 21-year-old who wanted to become a doctor. Jim and Helen Kilroy refused to let the worst thing ever done to their son become the only thing people remembered about him. They established the Mark Kilroy Foundation, which has supported anti-drug education, youth programs, and scholarships. and the foundation is still active today. On December 14th, 2014, Helen Kilroy died after living with ALS. She was 70 years old. Then recently, on September 18th, 2024, Jim Kilroy died at the age of 80. According to his obituary, his son Keith was beside him in the hospital, praying with him and trying to comfort him. A priest also visited Jim several times. One detail from his obituary really stuck with me. It was said that Jim was not afraid to die because, as a Catholic, he believed in eternal life and looked forward to seeing his wife, his son, his relatives, and his friends again in heaven. I'm not crying. You're crying. Constanzo promised his followers that murder could make them untouchable. Instead, Mark's disappearance exposed them. That cauldron did not make them invisible, and the rituals did not stop the police. And the man who called himself El Padrino died, hiding in an apartment less than 2 months after Mark was taken. Meanwhile, decades later, Mark's name is still attached to a foundation meant to help other people. All my sources that I used for this will be listed in the description somewhere. I also highly recommend checking out the Mark Kilroy Foundation if you would like to learn more about Mark and his family, or the work that they continued in his memory. And before we end, because Mark and his family were Catholic, and because faith became such an important part of how his parents carried on after losing him, I just want to offer a little moment of silence, or time to pray for them. If you're into cases about spiritual warfare, exorcisms, paranormal stories, cult crimes, and disturbing criminal cases, you can go ahead and subscribe if you want, because unfortunately, there's a lot more darkness to uncover. Also, if you would like, please check out the Mark Kilroy Foundation, or even leave a flower on the memorial pages for Mark, Helen, and Jim as a small way of paying your respects. I believe you can find them on findmygrave.com. I think that's what it's called. But I'll leave a link in my description as well if you want to send them any flowers. It's free. You also get to pick which flowers you want to give them as well. With that, I'll see you in the next one.